Welcome to this explainer on the human respiratory system. We're going to jump right in. Whether you're just refreshing your anatomy knowledge or gearing up for a big exam, we are going to break down the exact machinery keeping you alive right this very second into a quick, super clear framework.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit the introduction to gas exchange, trace the air pathway, and dive into the mechanics of breathing. Then we'll cover alveoli and gas exchange, brain control and protection, and finally wrap it all up with a quick exam revision.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Introduction to Gas Exchange.
Before we look at specific organs, we really need to nail down the core mission of this entire system. It honestly comes down to this one, unbreakable, beautifully simple formula. We're bringing oxygen into the body and pushing carbon dioxide out. This gas exchange is exactly what keeps our cells firing, and all that magic happens deep down inside the lungs.
Moving right along to Section 2, Tracing the Air Pathway.
Let's build a mental map of how this actually works by tracing a single breath chronologically through 5 major steps. First up, air enters through the nose or mouth. And remember, your nose is actively filtering, warming, and humidifying that air. Second, the air moves down the pharynx and passes right through the larynx, your voice box. Third, it hits the trachea, or windpipe. Fourth, that trachea splits into 2 main branches called bronchi, which then branch out like a tree into even tinier tubes called bronchioles. And finally, step 5, the air arrives at the alveoli. These are the tiny air sacs that serve as the main site of gas exchange.
Now, when those bronchi enter the lungs, you might kind of assume both lungs are perfectly identical, right? Well, they actually aren't. The right lung has exactly 3 distinct sections, or lobes.
The left lung, on the other hand, only has 2 lobes. So, why the difference? Well, it's basically a matter of real estate in your chest cavity. Your heart sits slightly to the left side of your chest, so that left lung is naturally just a bit smaller to make room for it. Oh, and by the way, both of these lungs are encased in a double-layered membrane called the pleura. It's filled with fluid to completely reduce friction every single time they expand.
All right, Section 3, the mechanics of breathing. I want you to take a deep breath in right now and just notice your own chest expanding. This is the rule of opposites in action. During inhalation, your chest volume goes up, and according to the laws of physics, when volume increases, pressure decreases. Because the lung pressure is now physically lower than the air pressure outside your body, air just rushes right in. For exhalation, the exact opposite happens. The volume of your chest cavity goes down, which forces the pressure up, literally pushing the air out. Normal expiration is actually a largely passive process. It relies heavily on the elastic recoil of the lungs just snapping back into place, kind of like a rubber band. But what exactly is changing that volume in the first place? Well, that would be the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the absolute primary muscle of breathing. When it contracts, it flattens out and pulls downward. That flattening is the key trigger that increases the volume of the thoracic cavity, totally kicking off the entire inspiration process, with a little help from the external intercostal muscles right between your ribs, of course.
Let's zoom in a bit for Section 4, alveoli and gas exchange.
Zooming all the way past those major airways brings us to the real stars of the show, the alveoli. These are tiny, balloon-like air sacs clustered at the very ends of the bronchioles, and they are completely wrapped in a microscopic net of blood capillaries. This incredibly thin barrier between the air and your blood is where respiration literally happens.
So here's how this swap actually plays out. Blood arrives at the lungs absolutely loaded with high levels of carbon dioxide. That's the waste from your body's tissues, and very low oxygen. Once it reaches the alveoli, oxygen diffuses right across that thin membrane into the blood. Simultaneously, the carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood and into the alveoli, where it gets exhaled, just like we said at the start. Oxygen in, carbon dioxide out.
Next up, Section 5, brain control and protection.
So the lungs are doing all the heavy lifting of gas exchange, sure. But who's managing the whole operation? It's actually a pretty fascinating question. Who exactly decides when we should breathe fast or slow? You don't have to think about breathing when you sleep, right? And when you go for a run, you definitely aren't consciously commanding your lungs to work harder.
The secret lies in the respiratory control centers of your brain. Your brain basically acts as this incredibly sensitive chemical sensor. And here's the catch. It primarily monitors the levels of carbon dioxide in your blood, not just oxygen. For example, if you start exercising, your muscles produce way more carbon dioxide. The brain senses this spike in CO2 and instantly fires off a signal to increase your breathing rate and depth. It literally drives you to breathe faster, not necessarily because you need oxygen that exact second, but to desperately clear out that accumulating carbon dioxide waste.
Now, there's also a vital built-in protection mechanism you absolutely need to know about for your exams: surfactant. Think of surfactant as a specialized, soapy fluid coating the inner surface of the alveoli. Its main job is to reduce surface tension. Without surfactant, those tiny alveoli would stick together and completely collapse every single time you exhaled. It would make it virtually impossible to inflate your lungs again. So yeah, it is a critical, life-saving substance.
All right, let's bring it all home with Section 6, Quick Exam Revision. We're going to run through a high-density recap loop right now for maximum retention. Here is your rapid-fire checklist. The main function: oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. The air pathway: nose to pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and finally the alveoli. The main site of gas exchange? You guessed it, the alveoli. The main muscle of inspiration? The diaphragm. Anatomy check: the right lung has 3 lobes and the left lung has 2. And the physics: when you inhale, volume goes up, pressure goes down, air goes in. When you exhale, volume goes down, pressure goes up, air gets pushed out.
I want to leave you with this final, kind of mind-boggling thought. How differently would you live if you had to consciously control all 20,000 breaths you take every single day? The respiratory system is just a total masterpiece of biological automation. It's constantly working in the background to keep your cells fueled and your body balanced, entirely without your conscious effort. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. I really hope you found this incredibly helpful for your understanding and your upcoming exams. Keep learning, keep growing, and I'll catch you in the next one.